Hi, everybody. I'm Jana Park. I'm the HIF Industry Manager. Thank you so much for joining us today, this Tuesday. We are so excited to be hosting this panel today. Anderson Lay is going to be our moderator, and he's going to be coming up in a second. I just wanted to, like I said, thank everyone for joining us. I'm sure you've seen this is a really exciting panel of, management and being in the industry and utilizing managers and what that means and what that looks like. So we're so excited about that. I want to take a moment to plug High Film membership. A lot of you are High Film members. Some of you are HIF members. And, we do these quarterly workshops, and we have a very exciting industry conference coming up at our next HIF Film Festival. It's going to be our first ever 3-day industry conference. Very exciting. We just confirmed the dates are October 24th to 26th. So please save the date. I'm pretty sure it's going to sell out. So be ready to get your passes for that. Very exciting. We've got lots of other exciting industry programs. So please check out the website, look it over, email me if you have any questions. I don't want to talk too long because I want to let this panel get started. So I'm going to introduce Anderson Lay, our creative director, who's going to moderate today's awesome panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jana. Hi, everyone. I'm Anderson. I'm the artistic director for HIF. Really excited about today's panel. Oops, there you are. Hi, there I am. I'm really excited about today's panel. It's like it's kind of try to demystify the role of the manager in the entertainment industry, and breaking into the entertainment industry, especially if you're outside major hubs like Los Angeles or New York, so especially here in Hawaii. In today's panel, I hope to demystify that role of the manager, especially in today's globalized yet fractured media landscape. We're in a moment of major transformation, post-strikes, post-pandemic, shrinking development slates, consolidation of distribution, and a cultural climate where global voices and diversity are simultaneously in demand and also under attack. Amid this turbulence, managers are being forced to evolve, not just as gatekeepers, but as creative strategists, brand builders, and long game thinkers for their clients. Today, we'll unpack how managers are adapting where they see this opportunity and how they're positioning their clients to not only survive, but lead the next era of storytelling. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our managers. Like start off with all the way from Singapore, Andrew Oy from Echelon Entertainment. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, how are you, Anderson?
Good, how are you?
Good.
And then I'd like to introduce also Raquel David from Authentic Talent and Literary Management. Hi, Raquel.
Hi, everyone.
And finally, we have Michael Krell from 3 Arts.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
Doing well. Excited to be here.
Great. So, we're going to talk for about an hour and whatnot. So, and then we'll close the panel with questions from the audience. So, if you have any questions, audience, you can put your comments in the YouTube comments section, and then we'll handpick those questions. So, look, I want to start off just basically, all three of you are in the entertainment industry. Also, this is a very international cohort of people here tonight, and Andrew from Singapore. Basically, you're based in Singapore. You're based in Vancouver. You have clients in Asia, and then Michael, you're based in the U.S. and Raquel also based in the U.S. but also originally from Australia, right? Mm-hmm. So let's start off with my first question. What were your influences growing up to enter the entertainment industry? What was that kind of gateway drug for you?
I'll go first.
Yeah.
For me, I remember being a teenager and being so excited about the fact that the X-Files was on Friday nights at 8:30, and I was just obsessed with the series, and I would always record every episode and watch the preview for the next episode in advance. And I just remember this kind of being so drawn into world building and the characters, and feeling like anything was possible in that genre. And for me, it was like it was escapism. It was, romanticism in terms of storytelling, but it was also this suspension of disbelief, particularly in genre, that just captivated me. And, I think I've always gravitated towards storytelling and storytellers. But yeah, that show had a huge impact, as well as a lot of prolific film directors. Like I always say that I love genre, I think, because I watched The Exorcist when I was like 6 years old, or The Shining when I was like 8 years old. And I had a parent that let me do that. And it just
Yeah.
had a profound effect on, what I was drawn to. So I think, based on, I guess, my childhood, I've just been really passionate about working with storytellers from that point onwards, and, creating cool stuff. So yeah.
That's great. You're genre gal. That's awesome.
Mhm.
How about Andrew?
For me, well, you know what? I'm dating myself, but I remember watching Jaws when I was 6 in a movie theater. And, at one point, the shark comes up and just goes towards the screen. And I remember, I was young, just pulling my legs back and just in my chair and just completely afraid of getting into the water for 2 years after that, into the sea, because, I live in Singapore, so we swim in the sea. And it's things like that. And it's those visceral reactions and then watching other movies. And movies can have such profound effect on people. Whether it's horror, whether it's a romantic comedy, or even just films with stories that tell people what it's like to live elsewhere, and how it affects people. So that's what affected me, growing up and watching Star Wars for the first time in a movie theater in 1977. And just going, wow, where did this come from? How do I get into this world? And I think that's where it all comes from. Watching all these wonderful movies and movie theaters, which we don't get to do very much. I mean, we do get to do it very much, but we don't. We just watch it at home. And watching movies, I was just at the Shanghai Film Festival on the weekend, and watching Peter Chan's film. It's so much better than watching on the tiny screen, because you're in an IMAX theater. It's so big and massive, and you really get into the film, as opposed to, you have all these things that could distract you along the way. Your phone, and it's just putting the phone aside for 2 hours and just not bothering and just watching and being in that world. And to this day, it still affects me.
And Michael?
Yeah, I think I had a kind of an interesting way into the business. I had no aspiration for any kind of film or TV. I, of course, love film and TV. And so I think that played a big role in my ultimate decision to pursue it. But I was, came out to LA for college, had no aspiration of being in the industry, was originally an engineer in school, realized I did not love math the way that my peers really loved math. And when I was kind of transitioning to what I wanted to do from that, the one thing that I knew I wanted to focus on was something where I could help people. That was like the big box I was trying to check, and I just didn't know what that looked like. And I wanted to do something businessy, and that would be fun and dynamic, but ultimately did something good and I was able to work with people. That was the thing. And so just so happened, someone suggested to me, like, hey, you're out in LA, you should maybe think about entertainment. You're working with talented artists and writers and directors and actors, and there's a whole business around supporting these talented people. And I was like, oh, wow, that's cool. I had no idea. And it was my first internship where I was working for just a small literary management company, got my first little foot in the door. And within a few months, it became really clear to me, after seeing a really awesome kind of win for my boss's client, selling a feature to Fox. And he wrote this beautiful letter to my boss, just saying how much he appreciated all the work they had done together. And not only is he providing for his family, but really feels like his dreams had come true. And to my boss's credit, he, sat me down, had me read that letter, and he was like, this is what management is about. This is what being a rep is about. It's not about, money or fame, it's this relationship with clients. And to me, it was kind of like a light bulb moment, like, oh, like I can intimately affect someone's life, not just for a day or for a week if you're like volunteering or doing things that you feel like you're giving back. But for me, I was like, oh, I could be, really helping someone in a way that's so much more deep. And so for me, industry has been just kind of like a cherry on top to that dynamic that I love. And I think, it's why from that day on, for me, pursuing representation specifically has been kind of like a laser focus, and ultimately got me through, over a decade of paying my dues and finally getting to be a manager and do the thing.
So, like, just my next question is, and maybe because for our audience, there are some seasoned people in the industry. There are some beginners as well. So maybe we can start off just from this starting off point. Like, what is the role of a manager, and what's the difference between a manager and an agent? So anyone can.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. Yeah. I mean, I guess from my perspective, which I'll always preface questions like that because everyone has a different answer. I think your agent is somebody that has like a very kind of top level view of your career and, really is that kind of more general, I guess, practitioner, if you will, that's kind of overseeing, your general business and, a very resource focused. So they not only have access to a lot of information, but they have other clients, showrunners, actors, directors that can help complement the work that you do in terms of projects that you're taking out. Your manager is a lot more specialized. So think of your manager as somebody that is more of a specialist in your field. So you're going to have more like time with your manager. Your manager's going to spend and provide a more detailed kind of focus to your career and your career goals. Your manager is there to, I like to say we are the 24/7 development exec of your business, because sometimes it does really feel like we're working 24/7. A great idea will strike and it'll come, not between the hours of 9 and 5. And, your manager is there to really kind of help, develop, nurture the creative process, connect the dots with who you're pitching something to, where you're forming relationships. I think as managers, we are thinking about your 5-year goal, your 10-year goal. Agents, on the other hand, are a bit more strategic in their focus. They're thinking of, how do I sell this one project by my client? Whereas while they're out, pitching a project that your manager is also doing, we are like going back to the client and developing the next thing. So, I would say that's the biggest difference. I think that sometimes that same question dovetails into, do you need a manager? Should you have an agent first, manager second, manager first, agent second? And I would say it really comes down to the need of the client. If you're an ideas generator and you're constantly, developing, writing, going after IP, coming up with a lot of original ideas, a manager can be really helpful in terms of the day-to-day of you doing that. If you're, a bit more plug and play and you're just focused on those big kind of open directing assignments, open writing assignments, and you don't think you need a manager, then an agent is perfectly, fine. So it really comes down to kind of the individual client career and their focus.
And then from my understanding, it's like, at least in the state of California, like agents have to be licensed, right? They have to be licensed, and then managers do not. So managers cannot negotiate work contracts. Exactly. That's the agent's job.
That's another,
Yeah.
So that I have my license in Canada.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So I'm actually allowed, as a manager, I'm actually allowed to negotiate. So that's why I've actually positioned my head office in Vancouver.
Oh.
Got it. Yeah.
I mean, personally, I'd rather not do that at all. I'd rather an attorney negotiate. really happy to
Yeah.
step away from that,
Yeah.
that process. Yeah.
Yeah, but just to add to what Raquel was saying, on an actor's perspective, because I believe that you may have some actors on this listening in, it's the same thing. For actors, managers, and agents are, we do the same thing, but yet not quite. Managers are just more specialized, but as you said, we're more after the 5-year goal, 10-year goal, and I think agents for actors are just a little bit more immediate in what they're looking at and what they're looking for.
Yeah.
The strategic or the metaphor I like to use in the simplest terms is I like to think of it as like managers are really your creative partner, your business partner, your day-to-day partner. And we're going to develop like this thing, whether it's your ability to act, whether it's your scripts, your pilots, what you want to direct. We're going to develop that with you and help you shape it and hone it. And we're usually a little more creative, and we're going to kind of give you our business input on what that is and help you manage your time. And then we have this thing that we've created together, and it's like, okay, we're agents over here. We're gonna hand that off to the agent, and they're a little bit more strategic, a little bit more direct. It's like, oh, now we handed them this thing. They're gonna go use their resources, their networks to go sell that, and we do that too. But they just have a little bit more of an infrastructure to know how to connect the dots and get that thing that we've created out into the world in the right way. So that's kind of like, I think, an easy way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we can start off with Michael and Raquel. I mean, you started in lit management and whatnot, and I know everyone's representing, all just different types of creatives, like aside from writers, directors, and actors and whatnot. But from a writer-director perspective, I mean, like as a client, like what are you looking for? How do you just approach like potentially this person as like a potential someone that you can you want to you offer your services as a manager? Is it all through references? It's all through endorsements, like from the film festival world or from other agents or whatnot? Well, how do you approach kind of potential clients?
I can go first. Yeah, I mean, I think it's taste driven more than anything. So, I think when I look at potential new client, I usually really love what I've read. I mean, you want to hope that your manager really loves the sample, and I think of course we are thinking about how to make money.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that does kind of weigh into the equation, but because the manager-client relationship is so involved, as Michael points out, we are your kind of creative partner. We do have to love the work. We have to love the writing, love the idea generation, really, really feel a sense of camaraderie in the creative process. So for me, I have to love it. I have to love the voice on the page, the concept. If it's a movie, yeah, you ideally want to sign someone out of a big festival, but I've signed filmmakers of small indies that I've just really, really loved, that have had big careers, that maybe haven't had a huge splashy festival release or launch or release. So it is largely taste. I will say, because I think this dovetails into another question that I'll just prematurely answer. What's the best way to get in front of a manager? And I do believe you just referenced it a little bit there, Anderson, in the references. So, being introduced by somebody else that manager knows or has a affinity with, maybe some business with or shared clients with, that is the best way to kind of reach out to a manager, because quite often, I would say like 5-6 times a day, I get cold emails saying, represent me. And I don't have the bandwidth to even look at them. So I could be passing on, the next Spielberg, and I wouldn't even know, just because I don't have the time to like read those emails. So yeah, I would say when a potential client is referred to me, there's a stronger chance that I'm going to read them and take a meeting.
Yeah,
Michael?
I would just add to that. I think that's absolutely correct. There's so many different ways. It's referrals. There's companies now too, like roadmap or stage 32 that are everywhere, and they're constantly sending us stuff. There's there's film festivals, there's social media. That's a big bucket that I play in now, and I think a lot of us are starting to look there too. So I think it's all just about, we rely on our taste and what we think is good, and that can vary widely from manager to manager. But whether I see something on YouTube, or I see something at a film festival, or I read something off the blacklist, or someone sends me a script, or a client sends me a script, I think now more than ever, we're all having to be a little bit more selective because things are tougher. But ultimately, whether it's something really developmental, which I think is different from an agent, like a manager, I think on the core of what we do is usually more willing to take on someone that's going to take a little more work and time. And we hope that in return, that's going to create a longer relationship. But it comes from everywhere. So I think when people are always asking, like, what lane, you just kind of have to do all the things. And the manager will usually find you more than you'll find them.
But you're talking with other people in the industry. For example, we talked before we jumped on, like how, Cord Jefferson, who's like Oscar winning screenwriter for American Fiction, and like he's he's represented by your company, I believe, right, by 3 Arts, and like there was a writers program, and there was a young writer from Hawaii that participated in that. And then what was and I know you went to university. You mentioned that you had a lot of friends who were from Hawaii. So what was the kind of interest in that? And
yeah,
also,
I
granted, like it wasn't because of that, because of they were like basically praising the work of this Native Hawaiian writer who's part of the program, right? So.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of like where like the personal taste and personal experience matters a lot. And you as the creative, you can't really control that. That's why I think it's more about the way we find you in those interactions. And for me, like, I went to college, I'm from New Mexico, from the desert, happened to become best friends with a bunch of guys from Hawaii and some girls from Hawaii, and just spent a lot of time hanging out with them, learning more about the culture. Spent several times hanging out in Hawaii with them over the years. And so I had some kind of like personal connection to that space. And so when Matt DeKneef, who I work with, had gone through Cord's program, and it was highlighted, went to the whole company an email about Matt, like, hey, this is great kid, and this program that just finished up. And I saw the bio that he was from Hawaii, and I just thought, oh, like that would be so fun personally to work with someone with that background. And of course, then I read the script, and the script was really, really good. So, if I had read the script and I didn't think it was really good, then I probably wouldn't have jumped in. But there was that kind of two-hander, both like my personal connection, and then also the work was really good.
Andrew, so like and then you primarily, you represent all types of artists, but I know that I've known you for a long time. You represent a lot of actors on a global space, not only in North America but also in Asia and whatnot, and primarily Asian and
only Asian talent, actually.
Only Asian talent, okay. And then especially now in the past 10 years, where there's the when I guess Asian faces, Asian content's becoming more prominent, especially in the mainstream. You have an Oscar winner as part of your client list with Yoon Yoo Jun, who won the Best Supporting Actress Oscar for Minari, right? So, but you also represent Lisa Liu, who's in her 90s. What an icon, But like, what are you looking for? You just came from the Shanghai Film Festival. And then how are you kind of keeping your feet on both sides of the pond, so to speak? And
it's a lot of late nights.
Yeah, but there's a lot of crossover. There's, as the world becomes, or the film and TV becomes more globalized, especially now Netflix is everywhere now. So how do you craft kind of like and nurture your clients' basically brand and business?
I think for me, it's about creating global business for our clients. Whether they're based out of the US, Canada, or, Japan or China. It's about creating global business brands for them. And it's about finding them new experiences and interesting scripts for them to be in, for them to act in, because a lot of them do have the experience now. There was a time when we were just looking for, like a lot of new faces, but time is limited. So as Raquel said, we rely on people to recommend people to us a lot of times. But with that said, it's about creating global. I want to create global artists, if that makes any sense. Um, Film, television, all these stories, they're all rooted in very basic things. Family, love, horror. Horror genre is like what scares you. Um, so I think it's about finding these projects that we can work with and internationally. So like I recently put Byron Man into a Korean movie that just opened. It's called Big Deal in Korea, but he's not Korean American. He's not even Korean American. He's just Chinese American. But it's creating these kind of links, putting our Japanese clients into Indonesian films or Chinese clients into American films. I used to specialize in just doing Asian clients into American films, but I think it's a bit more difficult now with what's happening politically in the US. So now, instead of just selling them to the US, I'm selling them around the world. And because they have value, they actually help the movie. They actually help the movie in terms of audience and marketing.
Well, I mean, you look
So
at the mainland Chinese market doesn't really need American films anymore, and you have all these emerging markets with healthy theatrical distribution in Southeast Asia. You're looking at the Middle East,
yeah,
you're looking at
Middle
Africa.
East, yeah.
Yeah, so like it's like,
Well, yeah, I think people forget, everyone thinks that, no offense to people in LA, because I work out of the US as well. In fact, a lot of my business is based out of the US, but I'm just trying to expand my clients' markets. But the global box office in 2023, I believe, was 33 billion, but only 9 billion of that was from the US. 73% of it was from worldwide box office. And you think about that, and then when you think about the fact that the majority of American films today, everything from like Avatar or Way of Water to all these movies, but they basically make more money out of foreign, or what they call foreign, the rest of the world, as opposed to just the US domestic market. So in my mind, for our clients at least, I'm just trying to promote them internationally as opposed to the US. But with that said, the US is the most influential. So it's about bridging that gap, and how do you bridge that gap, and how do you make sure that you're playing on both sides of the pond, so that you can create a global market. And it's about finding, to me, it's about finding good scripts for our clients to be in, to work with good directors, and they can be international directors. They don't necessarily. It's not just that our Chinese clients have to work with Chinese directors. It's Chinese clients working with Vietnamese directors or American directors or British directors or screenwriters. Good stories are hard to find to tell because there's a lot of rehashing of old stories. But when you have an original voice, that's when we want to be involved.
this is open for everyone, but I mean, there's incredible reduction when it comes to development deals. The streamers are not spending lots of money. Lots like the like pre-pandemic. Greenlighting things left and right. How do you pivot? How do you pivot and adapt to the new landscape when there's especially for your clients and when for like a writer director like that, and how do you and coming up with a pitch? Uh, what are you kind of adapting to the new landscape in the sense that because it's harder to, the development deals are not there anymore, and packaging and all that stuff is like all kind of the thing of the past. But
Yeah, I can talk a little about for me. I think just for my particular business, I've been looking largely to social media. It's a lot of the stuff I mentioned before. There's so much potential, I think, to. Sorry, there's a bit of feedback. I don't know if you guys can hear it.
We can hear you fine.
Okay. I think there's just a lot of opportunity in that space to provide some support, not only to grow a platform that we can leverage and use on our end to sell back into the traditional space, but also, as we've said, there's a reduction in the volume of film and TV that's being produced. So as a filmmaker, you might only get to make, even a very successful filmmaker, you only might get to make so many films per year or several years in between films or TV shows. And so if you have, to me, looking for the future, if you have a digital platform, a digital business to kind of support your efforts as a storyteller that's direct to audience, I kind of foresee that being an important staple for any storyteller moving forward. So both in clients of mine that have been in the traditional space for a long time, I'm trying to find ways to give them opportunity to grow platforms for themselves. I have young filmmakers that, we've worked very diligently to break them out into the social media space and had some really fun success doing that. I think as filmmakers or storytellers, you have a skill set that potentially, especially if you lean more towards the filmmaking side where you're a writer, you're a director, if you could be comfortable in front of the camera, you can wear so many of the hats in the content creation process. You can tell a lot of stories. You can do a lot of things all on your own, direct to audience, without any permission, without any development process, with very little money. And that can really grow and build really quickly if you have the right kind of talent and sensibility. And I think as a filmmaker, especially if you're classically trained or you've been doing this for a long time, it's probably content's going to be way better than most of the stuff that's out there. So I think it does travel really well, and it can, through branding opportunities, just as a quick example, I had a young filmmaker client, really, really talented, signed her off of a short film that she made that went on Instagram and went viral. And she really only wanted to be traditional for a long time. And we developed scripts, we developed pilots, and, stuff was just not really going because it's just really tough. So finally kind of had the hard conversation of like, you have the skill set to be an amazing content creator, not an influencer. I think there's a real distinction, really an entertainer, someone who's telling stories, making content for that purpose, not to say, hey guys, like I really love this beauty product, which I think is a really great business on its own, but just not really where I'm at. But she was able to find a lane for herself online, start making fun, entertaining content, not only making a decent amount of money in branding opportunities, but also gaining an audience that now supports her. And she wanted to make a short film that we've been talking about for like the last 2 years. And now she has this audience that is helping her to fund that opportunity. And she started a GoFundMe, and she was talking about the project that she wanted to make, and had lots of small donations. And then we just got like this crazy angel investor who donated like half the budget, just like in one drop. And so she got to make that film. And I think that's just such a cool example of someone who is having fun, enjoying her time being creative, finding an audience, finding a platform, getting paid really well to do it all, and can still pursue the traditional aspiration, using the money that she's gaining from these activities. And I'm getting incoming calls now from producers who see her stuff online and be like, oh my gosh, like she's great. Can I meet with her? So that's kind of how, just one great example, I think, of like adapting. I'll just say one more thing too, even for some of my traditional writing clients, I'm like, how can we, use your brain, your creative skill to create something interesting for social media, for YouTube? And I have several clients that have written on like high level Netflix shows and other network series that are trying to do something really small and granular and kind of just very cheap, that they're like writing like 2 or 3 page little scripts that we're going to just like shoot and put on YouTube and Instagram and see what happens. But I think it's a very interesting world that we're living in now.
Raquel, are you also looking at social media at all, or are you sticking to the more traditional space? I mean, you think of, I think you're muted, Raquel, but like you look at success stories like the Filippo brothers from Australia, who did the Talk to Me and Bring Her Back and whatnot. They were YouTubers basically with the very successful YouTube channel. So
successful, yeah. And the company that I work for, we signed them. So I don't represent the Filippo brothers, but they're extremely successful and so talented. I mean, I think absolutely, like, there's no shortage of finding exciting voices anywhere, like social media, like YouTube, like literally any screening any platform that you have to screen your material, whether you're a filmmaker or you're creating content that is that has a narrative, then absolutely. I mean, for me, I probably am not so much in that space. I'm definitely more traditional, but I do, like, I am on social media. I recently reached out to somebody who has a big account to see if we could turn her story into a scripted series, and we're now developing that. So, I mean, I think there's inspiration in terms of like the content that you can put on social media that could be parlayed into scripted, for sure. But no, I think I'm a bit more traditional in the sense of working with clients that are purely film or television or both. Yeah, but what was the original question? I've just forgotten. I'm so sorry.
I mean, how are you pivoting? Are you tweaking kind of how you're approaching, basically working with your clients in this kind of fractured landscape where development deals are not, plenty anymore, right? So,
I mean, I think it just comes down to just great writing. I think it's just that tried and tested idea generation, just not giving up, like continuously writing, generating ideas, speccing scripts, speccing pilots, speccing features. I mean, that really is the pivot to me, more than anything, because even though we kind of have this malaise in the industry right now, the reality is if you write something completely undeniable and exciting, it's gonna move. It's gonna move the needle, whether it's a short story, whether it's a feature spec or a TV pilot. Like, it's really the writing. So and it could also be something in terms of being really smart with intellectual property, finding a way into something in the public domain, or like looking at a book adaptation. I don't think there's, for me anyway, and I know that there are managers in the digital space that probably are making a lot more money in that space, and there's money to be made. But I'm a little bit of a purist in terms of what I love to do, and for me, it's just really just good storytelling. Yeah.
I mean, we're all in agreement. I mean, like, especially in Hollywood or everywhere else, like, IP is still king, right? Intellectual property is still king. And then is it me, because I've been reading in the trades a lot, is there a trend of now short stories becoming really big as IP to adapt into feature TV? So maybe why is that? Why are short stories becoming? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can speak to that. I mean, there have been a number of short stories that have sold, mid 6-7 figures, and it's kind of crazy when you think about it, because, you spend so much time developing a feature spec, sometimes months, if not a year, only to see like a short story that was probably written in a weekend go off and sell and get into bidding wars. So it is possible. It really comes down to the idea. So not every short story is going to sell. It's not the format. It's kind of what's in the short story as a proof of concept for TV series or a feature. So you have to think like big, high concept, hook driven, usually genre. You know, if I don't know who's listening to this, but if you do kind of hop onto Reddit, like go onto No Sleep to look at great horror shorts, they're not very long. They're like, you know, a few hundred words, but, you know, all the way to 50-page short stories, which really kind of outline, you know, the kind of core premise, you know, the world building. You really want to when you're writing prose, really find something that at a log line sounds like something that will sell big. And I'm talking like a big commercial film. No one's going to buy a short story that's an introspective drama or a quirky kind of absurdist, you know, auteur-driven indie. Like we're talking like, you know, short stories that have the ability to be $100 million movie. And that's something that I think Hollywood's really responding to, because it's easier to read a short story than it is to read an entire, you know, feature. And you're getting across all the things that you need to get across in the short. And it's also really enjoyable. It's enjoyable to read a short story. You know, it's written in a way that is just an easier read. So it's definitely a corner of the market that I think is getting a lot more momentum and focus. It's not easy. It's not easy to write a short story that sells for mid-six figures, but it is possible. So I would say if you're a writer in the business, you know, think about that. Think about writing, you know, other formats that can be used as IP for sure. The same with graphic novels. Like, you know, I think they're not as graphic novels aren't as big as they were like 5, maybe 8 years ago, but still, like if it makes sense to look at it as a graphic novel, go for it. Same with podcasts. Like podcasts are still selling, not a lot of money there, but you know, they have the potential to be parlayed into a film or a TV show. So if it makes sense creatively, then that's an avenue that you should definitely be exploring.
Yeah, I always advocate. I'm a big fan of scripted podcasts. And I think it's like as a proof of concept, it's like, you know, very much. It's it's much cheaper to produce, right? And then like if it's like, and if, you know, just like and dramatize, you know, your story as a scripted podcast. And I think it's like, and that's a huge boom market for sure. You know, like let's talk about kind of like, you know, I would say kind of, you know, the globalization of film and TV. You know, there's still, even though you know, there's opportunities for co-productions and whatnot, and you know, I mean, like look at Netflix. Netflix has various offices around the world. You know, like one of the, you know, shows I was hooked on Netflix was Department Q, which was a Scott Frank series that was set in Scotland and whatnot. He's an American, and that went through Netflix UK. You know, that's like, so it's like, are there maybe Andrew, you can chime in on this, like, you know, this co-productions, like, you know, like it's like, are there opportunities there? Because, you know, you have clients that are basically live in both the West and also in Asia Pacific, right? So what are you, I mean, like say Byron Mann, for example, is one of your clients. So like you just put him in a Korean film, like, and he's also a director too. Are you looking at, I mean, I hear like of like, you know, like Gareth Evans, who's like a Welsh director working in Indonesia, but he directed The Raid, you know, and like there's like, you know, like, I mean, look, especially in genre, like horror and action, you know, there's much more of a more penetration in that, in when it comes to kind of like shooting in Indonesia or shooting wherever, you know, like it's like, can you comment on kind of, are there more opportunities and more avenues because there are more co-production soft money initiatives that can help finance these projects?
I think it all comes down to, again, the script. But, you know, yes, there are, I think, more opportunities, particularly between the West and the East, or the West and Latin America, you know, all these other new territories, which are not new, which have been there for a long time. But, you know, producing films, producing TV shows in the US is so expensive these days. because labor rates are really, really high. Given that their experience level is through the roof, but people in other markets still make movies and make TV shows. So I think that there is definitely a trend because everyone's looking for money, and this money, it comes down to population and audience base, like who wants to watch what and who's watching, right? And I think a lot of your listeners today or watchers viewers today, they may be from Hawaii, but Hawaii has a population of 1.5 million people, right? When you're creating Hawaiian stories, if you're going to create Hawaiian stories, make sure that they can travel. Don't just make Hawaiian stories that are just for the Hawaiian market, because it will never. It'll be very, very hard for it to get out. Make stories that can tell global stories is what I keep saying. And if you think about it, there have been a lot of them, like a number. I won't say a lot, like Brother Sun, like American-born Chinese, like Interior Chinatown, which speak to the Asian American audience. I'm just using in this context, right? But at the same time, at the end of the day, Asian Americans only make up 22 million people in North America, in the US. If you include Canada, that's another 9 million people, 7 million people. So it's 29 million, which is theoretically not theoretically, but it's the population of Taiwan. Vietnam is 99.9 million people. Indonesia is 282, which is the fourth most populous country in the world, right? We need to create content, use American technology, use American know-how, create stories that travel internationally. That's the way I see it. And so that tell these international stories that audiences around the world want to watch. So my suggestion is for for American, not just Asian Americans, but American content creators to work outside the box and don't just create content for the US, but create content for a global market. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, I mean, I think there's precedent, especially from Hawaii. You have, Dana Ledoux Miller, who just directed, one of the biggest movies of last year, Moana 2, co-directed that, co-wrote it. But, before that, she was like our TV writer, but also she worked on, she co-show ran a Netflix Thai series called Thai Cave Rescue, about those, the rescue operation that saved those kids in that flooding cave. It's like that was through SK Global, right? I think, so like so I think I mean, do you think because like you look at like Squid Game is one of the biggest series of all time, right? Like it's like I mean kind of like borders and barriers are like K dramas are big business, right? So I mean, I think Michael and Raquel, are you looking at globally too, or are you just focusing on North America?
Yeah, I mean, I think I represent clients from all around the world, so 100%, and they're busy in their individual geographic territories as well as being busy in the US and in Hollywood. I come from Australia, where official co-productions were kind of the norm, like looking at financing independently and with a lot of soft money. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think those projects definitely are specific to what they are in terms of the components, both creative and the auspices around them. I think my predominant focus is the US market in terms of how are we creating a real career for our clients here. I think that's always going to be the number one priority. But look, there are so many great movies that are made independently that are hugely successful. So it just comes down to the individual project as opposed to it being, I think, a goal of the client's, career, let's say. I mean, you look at, The Brutalist, and you look at Nora, like this past year, truly independent films that have swept all the awards and really kind of taken Hollywood by storm. And I think that's really interesting to be in a business where you can have that level of success and not go through the traditional Hollywood system.
Well, I mean, there's also there's unicorns like I mean, again, people say authentic, diverse stories and what have you, but you look at those breakout hits like Crazy Rich Asians, that really you're looking at, or even there's always the My Big Fat Greek Wedding, right? So, so I mean, and I know like Michael and Raquel, your clients are also diverse as well. What do you? I mean, talking about kind of like it's all the power of story, right? And and then how about authenticity, and that kind of breeds kind of a universality when it comes to the stories, right? So how do you? Because basically, my next question is, I mean, you commented like you're all like partners with your clients to craft their kind of business, essentially, right? Their brand. What how do you what do you hope for them, because it's a partnership truly, what do you hope for them to deliver to you to help kind of make them as make their stuff powerful and attractive to basically other parties?
Yeah, I think what Andrew said about global stories is important, and making sure that clients that come from diverse backgrounds and have diverse experiences are, you know, if they want, and a lot of them do, are passionate about kind of infusing their background and their point of view into their writing. And I think for me, at least personally, I always try to honor that as much as possible. Like I never want to water down, whether it's like a Hawaiian client who might want to use certain language and words that's native to that, culture, that maybe, a lot of Americans wouldn't understand. So it's like, how do we kind of shape the language to make sure that there's maybe like you put the translation in parentheses or something, but it's like staying authentic to your voice. But then still the underlying story has to be globally kind of resonating. So I think it's really important. I think the market really wants to see that authenticity of the diversity. And then it's just like marrying that with a story that anyone can, regardless of your background, relate to and enjoy.
I mean, like you look at, I mean, again, other great examples, like, we brought up like Squid Game, Crazy Rich Asians, Chief of War, which is, Apple TV series. It's coming out in August, all set in ancient Hawaii. You look at Shogun, the winnings, I mean, becoming a phenomenon. And, Rachel Kondo, who was the, one of the main producers, and also Emmy winner, born and raised in Maui, lives on Maui, and they're all there, working on season 2 on Maui. But, I mean, it's what are the other, I mean, like, do you think now with the marketplace that there is a pushback for diversity and more safe storytelling, so to speak, now? Or do you think it's kind of like it doesn't matter?
I think there's definitely a little bit of a priority for buyers to find stories that can resonate as broadly as possible, because they're trying to find economics where there just isn't a lot. And there's a bit of been a diminishing return in story making, in the traditional sense, both in the rising costs of everything and the, lowering of value that any one singular property has. So I'd like to believe there's still people out there who are really passionate about finding those unique, diverse stories, but I do feel like I've heard a lot of stuff about, they want it to be as broad as possible. Like I think shows that were like really specific to a certain culture aren't selling right now as well, because it might be a little bit too specific. But I think you still see a lot of great examples of stuff that has infused, great diversity into it. But I think the concept itself has to be broad.
Does anyone else want to comment on that, or?
I mean, I think we're living in a time where, you know, it's very difficult to have a real DEI conversation because of what's happened in the last little while. So it's kind of maddening to have come so far in the business to only find out that it doesn't really, you know, check a box anymore. And that's just the reality of a lot of buyers. It's unfortunate, but you know, I think what Michael said is correct in the sense that you always want to be focused on in development stories that can travel. I think yes, international, yes, you know, diverse-led stories for sure, but we are living in a time where that has become more challenging, I will say. So good storytelling is good storytelling. But I don't think the diversity thing is unfortunately, and me speaking as somebody who identifies as mixed race, you don't have the same, you know, calling card anymore. And that's just the sad reality of what's happening in America.
Andrew, go ahead. Grass
No,
is
for me,
greener outside of the U.S.
No, I mean, like I would say, like, you know, at least 50 to 60% of my business is in the US. So it's not that I'm outside the US. But, you know, with what's happening in the US today, it gets scarier every day. You know, sitting out here and watching international news is so scary. But I think what it is that, again, I go back to if you, for diverse filmmakers, diverse storytellers, if you can't find your partners in the US, then you have to look elsewhere. And so partner with people from outside of the US. It's a very big market that, you know, I think we all get a little bit boxed in sometimes in our thinking, but we need to expand it. We need to think outside the box. And where can this story go to? You know, like if it's a Hawaiian story, you know, what about, you know, Hawaii and Japan have a very strong connection. And everybody goes to Hawaii. Everybody loves to go to Hawaii, but tell stories that can resonate with the Japanese, for example, or with the Koreans, you know, and find touch points that you can incorporate into your stories that can help, so that you can, you know, use Korean actors or Japanese actors in your film or TV show, and that might help expand your market, or, you know, that's the way I see it.
Yeah, and I just add to, like, 100% agree, and I'll just add to what I said earlier, so it doesn't sound very, you know, dismal. But there are great programs that are run in Hollywood that celebrate, you know, gender diversity and diverse backgrounds, minorities. Like, there are so many great programs that continuously fight the good fight. And if you are a diverse filmmaker writer, you should absolutely apply to them, because they're going to be so helpful and so beneficial, not just in developing your work, but also raising your profile in the business. So don't be discouraged by what I just said. I want to be positive about it, because, you know, there are so many great fellowships and programs, and, you know, I mean, Kate Blanchett just did one with Netflix, I think, called Proof of Concept, which I'm sure she'll run again. That is just phenomenal. And you know, there's so many writing fellowships and directing fellowships. So yeah, just apply to everything I say.
Yeah, and we'll open it up to questions, but like before that, I mean, this also depends on taste, on the, you know, the you know, the tastemakers or the development execs. You know, like, again, you know, like FX is a great example. Like, FX has great taste, and, you know, Shogun was there, you know, you know, other great shows and whatnot. So it just depends on who. I mean, like A24 has a brand because, you know, they're kind of going for that type of stories as well, right? So you know, if a film breaks out in Sundance, that's good capital, good value to it, right? So so yeah, so there's a lot of different things. Okay, so let's have some questions from the audience. I think one is from Artist Fan. did everyone work with a mentor on the day-to-day details in the beginning? I mean, Michael, you said that you were an intern, right? And then what was the kind of like, I mean, what did you learn, kind of like informing your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone has to learn from someone. And for me, I literally had not a single connection in the business. And it was a matter of applying to every opportunity I could. I got rejected from all the obvious places, especially not really understanding how the business worked when I first tried to get in, and kind of lowering my expectations, which I think ultimately is smart because you just have to kind of get that first foot in the door. So working for a very small company, which was just one manager who worked out of his house, that was kind of the level I got in at. But he had one client that was at ICM at the time, and I kind of pinged that internship into an internship over there, and then was able to kind of, from ICM, was a better stepping stone to get some other great opportunities before I graduated school. And then, worked for a couple of years at ICM under some agents, and then came back to the management side at 3 Arts. And over here, spent 6 years working for various people, learning the craft. So I think I felt very confident when I was able to step out on my own as a manager, because I had just seen and heard, and also had the chance to practice in a way, representing and working with artists for, over a decade. So having all that training and time, I think, is really, really important and helpful. So yeah, mentors are super important, both on the business side and on the creative side.
Raquel, you were in production, right? Before, I mean, I think weren't you working at Rhombus Media, the Canadian company?
I started my career working with independent producers. So I did, work for various companies in Australia, and I worked for Screen New South Wales as a production and development exec for a little while. Went to Toronto to work with Rhombus with Neve, and he's an amazing producer out of Canada, and did a lot of international co-productions. So yeah, I do come from a independent producing background into management.
And how about you, Andrew? You've been around. I mean, you mentioned that you saw Jaws in the theater. That was It's the 50th anniversary of Jaws, by the way. But anyway, I mean,
no, I've been doing this for 33 years. Like Michael, I entered the business knowing no one, not a soul in the world. I think the closest I had to people in the business was my 2 friends that I met in a bar. One was a location scout, and the other was a crafty services guy. But along the way, I decided that I was going to start representing Asian actors in the beginning, just because I was on a film set doing extra work, and I just learned from there. And people were looking for Asian actors, but nobody was supplying. So I decided, in my very naive, idealistic way, I can do this. I can find people to help fill this gap, because they were casting a movie called The Hunted in Vancouver, Joan Chen and Christopher Lambert. This goes way back. And but one thing led to another, but nobody wanted to represent Asian actors, so I stepped in. And at one point, Raquel talked about X-Files. X-Files was shooting in Vancouver. They came calling because they hadn't, every series after a while they have that Asian episode.
The Chinatown episode.
The Chinatown episode, or this one was about the Vietnam War. So being from Singapore, I actually know how to use firearms, and I'm trained because I was in the Army for 2 years. So they needed people to shoot M16s, and I could use it. So at one point I was even in the X-Files. But you grow from there, you learn from there. And I think the most important thing is that naivete and idealism can take a kid a very long way. Here's proof. And you speak to people, be nice to people. Remember that the people that you meet on the way up are also the people that you're going to meet on the way down. So you just have to be nice to people. And people have given me advice. I remember negotiating my first actor's agreement. I knew nothing. I knew zero. And I was very excited that they were going to hire my client and for an acting role. So I started talking to the casting director. The casting director goes, "You've never done this before, have you?" And I could lie and say I have, or I could just, you know what, you're right, I've never done this before. So she proceeds to give me a half-hour lesson on what I needed to ask for. So at the end of it, she goes, so what do you want for your client? And I said, I want this, and this from the points that you gave me. And she goes, I'm giving you nothing. I just gave you a very important life lesson. You get nothing. This is what your client gets. It's his first acting gig. And I'm like, okay, thank you. So I think it's appreciation for what people have to say and listening to people and just being nice to people and meeting people along the way and going out there and just selling yourself as a writer, as a director, as an actor. And today it's a lot easier because when I started, there was the internet was still dial-up. There's no social media, so it's a lot easier for people today to sell themselves as writers, directors, actors. So use the tools that you have been blessed with. That's what I say.
Okay, a question from Cyrus. What has been the most rewarding aspect of managing clients?
I mean, I'll go first. I mean, really, it's just them landing a job, and usually their first job is always the most exciting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or going to the first red carpet with them from their first job, and seeing how excited they are. But at the end of the day, I tell them, the red carpet's only 5 minutes of this entire thing, of this entire journey. But it's that pride that you get. It's like a parental pride, taking them there, that they're being acknowledged.
Yeah, I think it's just those moments, like I mentioned that letter that I got to read as an intern. It's like getting to now live that with multiple clients, and it's something that also doesn't stop. Like the first one is definitely always one of the best, but it can always keep growing, and it's those moments that really, for me, I think it's interesting to think about it almost like for managers. I think they'd all resonate with this. There's like almost like a selfish satisfaction in helping people in that way. Like it really is a gift to be able to do that, and it it makes it all worth it, because there's a lot of down stuff and no's that we get. So every time you get a little win with a client, it's just incredibly rewarding.
Okay, so I mean, we have now a lot of questions, but let's go speed through them really quickly. From Adrian actually has a couple. What's your favorite little known networking strategy or tip? Anyone have a favorite little nugget of?
Say hi and smile.
Just be nice.
Be nice.
Yeah,
I think
mine would be don't take rejection personally.
Yeah,
Michael?
That's a good question. Gosh, I think one thing that I've learned is that everyone wants, there's an incentive in this business to make connections. I think you just have to remember that when you're about to walk up to that person or reach out to someone on LinkedIn or send an email, like in most cases, I think especially now as the business has largely, I think, changed, where we really are trying to just be good people and work with good people, and everyone is wanting to make connections. Even someone, I think, who's very senior in the business will say, hey, I want to know the young people. There's mutual benefit and even like a big gap in kind of maybe experience level that can be had. So, I always try to tell our interns, it's like, don't be afraid to go to every assistant, every manager, or as a young filmmaker, don't be afraid to get out there and put yourself out there, because ultimately everyone is mutually invested in growing together. And so, if you can kind of try to keep that in the back of your mind as you're putting yourself out there, I think that's something that's helped me a little bit.
Okay, so we got a lot of questions. So let's get one from, actually this is an interesting question, especially with the current landscape. From Duncan, how have recent visa crackdowns in the US impacted how you approach managing international talent? Does that?
For me, it does. Because actors, for American actors, for Asian actors, who don't have the visas to work in the US, for example, it's really hard to get an O1 visa at this point. I remember at one point in time, you just needed one offer letter, and then it became two offer letters. And then the last one we got for our client, and I insisted to the lawyer, I want this visa before January 6th. And in the end, it took us three offer letters, which had to be verified by SAG. It's a thing, and it's also a lot more expensive now. It's like $10,000 for people who want to work in the US. But I think for Americans who want to work outside of the US, it's a little bit easier. Actually, it's a lot easier. Especially if writers and writers, you can write from anywhere. Directors, if you have to go there to work, then you need a visa. But for actors, you basically can, just pack up and go. And as long as you don't overstay your welcome in that country, you can be there for a while and at least explore it.
Michael and Raquel, do you have American clients who are interested in working overseas?
Yeah, it doesn't affect
Yeah.
it doesn't affect me at all. It doesn't really matter if the person has a US visa or not. If they get a job here, then we just sort that out to get them the visa for that job. It's not right now it's not a point of consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a wait and see kind of thing too.
Yeah.
It's a bit of both for me because I represent some people that are younger filmmakers that are looking to come over here for work. So I've been in the process on 2 different O1B visas with them. And it's a lot. It's hard and it's expensive. But I think what's great about the world is that it's more global than ever. And, I'm working with clients that are all over the world, and they're, like Raquel said, they're working in their own markets. But once the leverage point is there, where if you like sell a film or something that's really sizable, those companies will work out the visas for them. So I think if you're not in the US, there's so much you can do in your own market. And I think it's just about focusing on that until you reach the leverage point to kind of justify that visa, because it is a lot. And it's not easy to get.
Yeah, I mean, we have questions that are kind of similar, and then you kind of touched upon this earlier, but from Joey, kind of encapsulates all these questions. How do you know you're ready for a manager?
I think the best advice I like to give people is that I've seen so many times where people will graduate school or they'll have some event where they're like, okay, I'm ready for a manager. I'm going to start seeking for one. And then they kind of pause themselves. They pause their activities. They don't put themselves out there as much. They feel like the next step for them is getting that manager or that agent. And they like wait for that to happen. And to me, I think you need to be thinking about yourself as a business, and you are going to grow and do your thing with or without representation. You're going to make your connections. You're going to write your features. You're going to shoot some short films, do all the things without help. Because ultimately you still need to be the driver of your own career with or without us. So just to like be in that mindset and, really just pursue the career. And eventually, I think there's 2 ways to look at it. Like at the right time, the manager will find you. So I think it's not so much about you like knowing when you're ready, but it's kind of like when you're doing enough stuff that's getting out there and people are seeing it, like you're going to have managers knocking on your door. And then it's about evaluating like, am I in the right position to really have someone help me? And I think we work with people that are, just starting out if they have the right kind of creative spark. So I think I'd like to think everyone could use a manager at any level. So it's just about when do you have that leverage where a manager's coming to the table and finding you and not waiting around and not changing your strategy or what you're doing based on, hoping that a manager is going to come in and change your life. Like I kind of like to think of it like if it's a graph where your career is kind of on this trajectory, this upward trajectory, you would still be on that trajectory with or without us, but find the right person at the right moment, and maybe it just kind of goes up a little bit faster, a little bit more exponential.
Here's what I'd like to say, if you don't mind. Let me just
Yeah, go
add
ahead.
this to that.
Go ahead.
Lawyers, doctors, they all get education. They all have to study really, really hard to become lawyers and doctors and accountants and all that. And then, they have these not internships, residencies, doctors of residency. Lawyers have, they become articling students, and then, they become associates before they become a real lawyer. And I think it's the same with writers, directors, and actors. You have to start somewhere, and you have to put in the hard work, and then you'll get noticed. And like Michael said, just do your own thing, and if you're the right person, we will come to you.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. That's a great
right. People don't think, they think that just fresh out of school they can become the next Spielberg. Not everybody can become the next Spielberg. I'm sorry, but there's a trajectory that you have to follow. Not follow, but at least get the experience.
Yeah, ultimately we need something to manage. So it's like a lot of the times, at least at 3 Arts, we're coming into someone who's already done a couple features, or they've written on several rooms, and we definitely take on more developmental talent when we see it. But a lot of times we are looking for a bit of that business that's already kind of been built, and we're coming in and we can help manage that business. And you have like lots of things. You're like, oh my gosh, what do I do with all the things in the air? Where do I put my energy? I'm really struggling to manage the slate of projects. That's where we can come in and be really helpful. So you kind of have to get yourself to that point.
Okay, we're going to end with one last question from Jonathan. Do you feel a screenwriter needs to pick a genre? If so, how do you help a writer choose when they like to write? I mean, it just depends. I mean, I think my answer would be, if you like that genre, just choose that lane. If you love, Raquel, you love genre. Are you gravitate towards
Yeah. Yeah, happy to answer that question. And sorry, it's getting so dark here, so it's like kind of washed out a little bit. But yeah, I think it's a really good question. As a writer, because if you do write in multiple genres and you do enjoy writing in multiple genres, it's great. But starting out in this business, you also don't want to like confuse people about who you are and what you're bringing to kind of put your stake in the ground, so to speak, as to who you are. So I think it's really important to do a lot of self-introspection and ask yourself, what kind of career do I want in this business? And what kind of films or shows do I really want to make? Do I really want to get behind and be the ticket, be the piece of material that introduces my voice to this business? You don't want to dilute that when you're starting out. You want to be very strategic and very specific. And also, as you say, Anderson, like have a passion, because passion's everything, So I do think like not just kind of picking a genre for your career, but being specific with how you're entering into this industry. And I think, Ari Aster's career is like a really interesting example, because I remember talking to his agent, and, he had multiple projects that he was developing when he got signed to WME, and his agent was like, oh, Hereditary, that's the one. Not necessarily because it was a better script. Obviously, it's a great film. But because it's genre, and genre does, those projects come, there's a hunger and a need from buyers for genre projects. And so I think it's a testament to just being specific in terms of establishing yourself. What is that piece of material that is the first thing someone reads of yours? So it's a very long-winded response, and I'm sorry, but I do think it's important to spend a lot of time considering that as a young writer.
Yeah, I'll echo that, and just I think the way I like to think about it, which I think can be helpful, is like, it's definitely a question I get asked all the time, and I never want to put clients in a box. I think if, like Raquel said, if you genuinely just want to do TV, or you just want to do film, or you just want to do a certain type of genre, great, do that if that makes you happy. But a lot of people I find, especially these days, they want to be a little bit more flexible. And so what I say is, and I think this is very much in line with what Raquel was saying, is like, you don't need to define yourself by a genre, but you should define yourself by some characteristics, like staple characteristics. And I like to have my clients really think through in advance when we're just kind of figure out what kind of stuff do you want to write. Like, think of like 5 or 6 things that will make your voice. Because to me, I really don't like the word voice. It's really hard to understand and it's kind of abstract. But I think of someone like Christopher Nolan. It's like, oh, okay, everyone knows Christopher Nolan's voice. But to me, it's because they've seen a bunch of his movies like over back to back, like, oh, okay, now we know what that voice is. So when you're a young writer, like, how do you establish that? Well, if you can say, well, I'm a writer who wants to, stick to writing stories about, underdog characters and like really like vast settings, or like find those staple things, so that whether you're writing a half-hour pilot or an hour pilot or a feature or a TV show, like what is that gonna, what's the through line between all your writing that people will say, oh yeah, it's this type of writer's story because it has that type of character dynamic, it has that type of setting dynamic, it has that type of propulsive action. Like, what's going to be your thing that's going to be your voice, that's not beholden to a genre per se, that could be transplanted, is the way I like to think about it.
Okay, well, I mean, this concludes our panel. Thank you so much, Andrew, Raquel, Michael, for staying up later, staying up early. I mean, actually, it's not that early for you, Andrew, in Singapore, but thank you so much. Just for all of the attendees here this was a great panel. Hopefully it helps demystify the role of managers, what they're looking for when it comes to emerging talent and representation. And just a couple of things, we have, if you're a HIF industry member, there's the High Film membership, which I know all of you are active members. If you're not, please tell your friends to join HIF membership. Also, we have the 45th annual Hawaii International Film Festival presented by Hale Kalani, October 16th to 26th, right there, right on the screen, on Oahu, but we're also going to be on the neighbor islands in early November throughout the islands. So all that information is at our website, hif.org. We're going to revamp our industry components at HIF 45. So stay tuned for news for that. Hopefully these managers will be in attendance one day. We'll see. We'll talk. But yeah, that'd be great.
I'll be there.
Yes.
Yeah.
No problem. But actually, again, all of our information is our website at hif.org. And just follow the news. Follow us on social media, on Instagram, Twitter, X, Facebook, you name it. So, and TikTok. So again, thank you very much, Michael, Raquel, Andrew, and then we'll see you all very, very soon. Mahalo, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.